3 years ago, a waterborne bacteria dubbed the manic flu popped up at the same time all around the world. While it wasn't at all dangerous at the time, it was highly contagious. While some people got a minor headache, most people didn't show any symptoms for the first year. Most were what you call carriers of the bacteria. While the government did some investigation on the pathogens, the research at first wasn't deemed a major priority to the people's safety. They didn't take it too serious. To them, it was just another less severe flu. It was only many months after, when the bacteria was already widespread, that new symptoms began to appear. Losing the sensation of pain, no fear or sorrow, and heightened rage. A year after the first people got infected, the hospitals were flooded with new patients, and the police had to arrest those affected by the bacteria left and right. The infected were now deemed dangerous to the society, attacking those that had not yet fallen in the hands of the bacteria, biting their victims, smearing infected blood in the bite wounds. Many countries closed their borders and quarantined the affected, but it was too late. The bacteria hadn't mutated. The same bacteria was present with everyone, just dormant. It didn't take long for the law enforcement to fall, infected by the bacteria, turning against their own people, arresting the healthy to turn the citizens into one of them. They stood at supermarkets, large companies, busy streets, waiting for us, forcing the healthy to share blood with the affected in their own blood rituals. The Reds, we call them. We went into hiding in a small village, away from the dangerous cities and affected officials. Hiding in abandoned buildings and makeshift labs to find a cure to the plague. We were with 10 immune people. 5 men, 3 women, and 2 children. My name is Zach, a 25-year-old biochemist who had just graduated university when the pandemic struck. We helped in manufacturing a cure, but to no avail. It has been 2 years now since the downfall of society. And to our surprise, the economy hasn't collapsed yet. At least not for the affected. When there are no immune ones nearby that they know of, they act fairly normal, just living their day-to-day life. Although some things haven't went back to normal again. Violence on a small scale is seen as normal among the affected. While gang activity and robberies are still punishable, it has become commonplace for the affected to fight out disputes as they lack both fear and pain. It has come so far that next to regular hospitals, many first aid shops popped up in big and small cities, where the citizens can get their joints popped back in place, broken bones reset, and wounds stitched up for a reasonable price without anesthetics. Sometimes we, the immune ones, still have to go outside to the grocery store to buy ourselves food and other supplies. Luckily, we can depend on Brian and Layla for money, as they had their own business before everything went wrong. While we still have food, our perfumes are running low, but we need them if we want to keep entering the city. The affected have a certain body odor that is different from us. While for the most part we can copy the scent, there are still differences only the affected can pick up with their heightened smell. As well as Lucy, a little immune girl aged 12, that already had an amazing sense of smell the moment she was born. She can also sense those small differences in body odor, so she helps us make perfumes to fit in with the affected. It was morning when we decided to head to the supermarket. Layla, Lucy and me, acting like a small family who wanted to go grocery shopping and buy some perfume and cologne for the wedding that was coming up. Lucy had to come with us to make sure that the products we bought were exactly right. As some perfumes might smell the same to us, but depending on how old they were and the exact origin of the ingredients, could still smell slightly different to both Lucy and the affected. We had to do this each month to make sure. We used the last of our perfume flask before leaving the safety of our farm, driving into the city in our car, a real family car. The makeshift lab we stayed at had acres of plants and cows with a few farmers at work far in between. Two farmers, a young boy and an older man, were bickering about something I couldn't make out. Lucy, sitting in the back seat, lowered herself in her seat, clearly afraid of what the men were doing. Looking in my rear view mirror, I could see how the adult picked up the boy and threw him on the pavement. These things are commonplace now. Adults abusing their children, as neither of them see any wrong in their actions. Crimes that used to be illegal have now become the new normal. A cold shiver went down my spine just thinking about it. I focused my gaze fully on the road, trying to distract myself from the lump forming in my throat. Poor boy. The closer we got to the center of the city, the more dangerous it became. On the intersection just before our turn, there was a traffic jam. The smell of smoke and car exhaust scorched the insides of my nose. Bouldering roars and loud horns echoed over the highway. "It's going to be okay, sweetie," Layla said to Lucy. "It's going to be okay." Layla put her hand on my leg. I could feel it shaking. She was scared, like the rest of us. Every once in a while we could drive forward, just a bit closer to the mayhem. Close enough to hear a car alarm go off. The shouting became understandable. There was a fight going on. I turned on the radio to a random channel, banning out the violence outside as we moved closer to the danger. But over the radio I could still hear the shouts and the screams. They weren't screams of pain, screams of fear. More of a war cry. The high-pitched voice that penetrated my ears gave off this weird, eerie feeling. Like a psychotic woman or possessed baby, scattering of feet and dull pounding noises of people hitting people. A loud bang erupted a few feet in front of us, close enough to hear what it was but too far away to see. Something went flying against the car, or someone. Shattered glass fell against the concrete pavement. Police sirens audible in the back. "Zach," Lucy whispered. As I looked behind me, I saw him. A 250-pound man climbing on the trunk. He looked like a worn-out, overworked lumberjack. His hair and beard scruffy and unkempt. Scars littered all over his face like a web made by a spider on heroin. His right shoulder appeared to double in size as he heaved his bloodied axe to shoulder height. His bloodshot eyes looking right into my own. As he had climbed up, he slammed his heavy foot on the trunk, the car shaking from impact. "Zach," Lucy whispered again. "Everything will be alright," I whispered. The lump in my throat made it sound more like a squeal. My heart was racing, sweat piling up between my hands and steering wheel. The roof of the car dented in as the giant man stepped further on top of the car. It made a hollow noise with every step he took, barely audible over the music. He screeched. The man on top of the car roared a barbaric screech. The lumberjack fell down on top of the car roof, his face scratched into the front window of the car, his dead eyes wide open, looking straight at me. Blood pouring from a gunshot wound on his head onto the windshield. The crazy man heaved himself up on his arms, the car denting under protest. I clutched onto Layla's hand. "The Reds are here." To my right stood an officer with his gun held in front of him, pointing at the lumberjack. "Look bored," I whispered. The lumberjack crawled off the car moving up a bit as the weight of the man was lifted. He casually walked back to his car, unbothered and unburdened by the gaping wound on his head. I tried to calm my breathing, slow down how quickly and deep my breaths were. The Red walked closer, his piercing eyes burning holes in the side of my skull. I looked at him from the corner of my eyes, tensing up my stomach to keep my chest from moving up and down too much. His predatory gaze jumped from person to person, taking a close look at everyone in the car. He smashed into the side window, taking a whiff of our scent. Seconds felt like minutes as he took a deep breath, gazing onto Lucy to see her reaction. She was silent, dead silent. I didn't hear a squeak. The law enforcement looked back at me, putting both hands on the broken side window without a second thought, his right hand holding a gun. Blood trickling down the car door as the shards of glass cut open his skin. "Papers, please," he said. His voice was deep and raspy, unnaturally raspy, a voice he could not have been born with. While the smell was vague, this was the smell of the affected, the smell that made the hair on my arms stand up, the faint smell of chemicals. The bacteria released something inside their bodies, a certain chemical that kept their brains and bodies functioning, even when they should be dead. Like an electric shock that makes the leg of a dead frog twitch. While many cleaned themselves rigorously to get rid of the smell, it was always there, like the smell of liquor on an alcoholic. Always present. He might talk like a cop, walk like a cop, sing like a cop. He isn't one. He's dead, just waiting to take us down with him. "All right, officer," Layla replied. Her voice sounded shaky but strong. Trying to keep up the facade that we were, she took the papers out of the glove compartment and handed it to the officer. Blood ran down his arm and onto the paper as he accepted the papers with his bleeding hand. He read the papers, line by line. Layla looked at me, the whites in her eyes visible, a tear rolling down the side of her face. Moving as slow as I could, I brought my hand to her face, wiping away the tear. As I looked back, I saw Lucy. She was frozen in fear, not moving an inch. Her gaze glued onto the red. There was no way she could act normal if she asked her a question. Her gaze glued onto the red. There was no way she could act normal if he asked her a question. "Lucy," I whispered. "Lucy." Her eyes shot at me, her body still as tense as before. "Breathe," I said. "What's wrong with her?" the officer asked in a demanding tone. I looked at him. He had tilted the gun to point it at me. I could see the bullet waiting in the chamber, ready to blow my brains out. "She has to pee," I replied. "Ever since we ended up in traffic. Bad bladder," I added. He kept his dead gaze on me, scanning my face for any sign that could give me away. I could see a scar running from just below his right jaw to the middle of his throat. His skin was pale as the night, with scar tissue on his left cheek, as if it had previously been scraped off. His red, hollow eyes, sitting far back in its sockets, were void of any emotion, like an alligator waiting to pounce. His bone structure poking out from under his skin, the light casting shadows under his thick eyebrows and the rest of his face, twisting his undead face into a sadistic grin. The muscles on his jaws tense, slithering like snakes under his skin, veins popping out from the side of his forehead, pumping dark blood through his decaying flesh. His nostrils expanded as he took another whiff. "I think I smell fear,"